Hey, good day, folks. Welcome to another edition of Lumberjack Logic. I'm your host, Neil Johnson, and I'm so excited to be with you and share the news. People, this is a huge story. It's massive, and I don't want to like overstate things. I don't want to, but stop what you're doing right now. Share it across every platform. Smash the like button. You are going to hear one of the most unbelievable stories of corruption. There it is in the background again. I did it, folks. I had the other window open. I'm still good at that. Anyways, but just share this out. Smash that like button. Chat in with where you're from. Let's get this stream out to a bunch of people because this is one of the greatest stories of corruption that you are going to hear involving child trafficking, election rigging, basically the coup of a government just south of our border by our State Department. It's going to blow your ever-loving mind. Okay, really quickly, do want to mention, Mike Lindell's in depositions again today. That man has really taken it on the chin, but go support him. MyPillow.com. Use promo code Lumberjack for big savings. The mattress deal is still going on, as are all the other cyber deals. The towels are the best. The sheets are the best. It's just the best stuff. Just go get some, all right? Anyways, you can also call the 800 number at 1-800- 568-2865 1-800-568-2865. I've got a special guest for today's show who just got back from Guatemala. Some of you may be familiar with him, some of you may not, but let's welcome him in. This is Ryan Matta. Ryan, good to see you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Neil, thank you for having me, and thank you for having the courage to talk about this story.
Well, this is nuts, and I think, Ryan, I guess what I find, you just got back from Guatemala. I mean, you've done a documentary on child trafficking. This is your space. You've been involved in this. I had the privilege of interviewing Tim Ballard not too long ago. I met him at the RNC, and I talked with him, and I'll get your thoughts on this before we break this news. But in talking with him, I said, Tim, how do you do it? I said, I don't understand. I mean, you're seeing just the worst of everything all the time. I'm like, how do you keep your sanity? How do you keep your perspective on life? And he said, well, Neil, he said, you kind of battle some depression. You do. And he said, it's really hard. You just pray. You try to stay, do things the best you can, but it's really a fight. And so you're deep in that world as well. So let me start by asking you, how do you keep your perspective in the world?
I have a child, so everything I do is for my son, and I know the damage that's being done to these children. And
Yes.
I would tell you stories that would get your channel taken off of YouTube. They're so graphic and horrific. So I always put my perspective as, like, even when I'm having a bad day, I think to myself, if you think about the world, there's 8 billion people, let's just say. And let's just say the top 1,000 people in the world who are having the worst day of their life. We're talking about like the absolute worst days of somebody's life. And then understanding that there's a mother who just came home and found her daughter who had been raped and molested and then murdered and stuffed under her bed like a box of pizza by an illegal immigrant here in America. You have these children that are chained in basements and savagely raped by these men 7 to 10 times a day for the last 2 years. And at the end of the night, when the gentleman comes and throws her plate of flute on the floor and rapes her, he puts a cigarette butt out on her arm. So that way, in case she ever escapes, every time she looks down at her arm, she's reminded of the savage, how she was savagely raped by this animal. So these are some of the things that these people are going with, and they're having a bad day. So my day, no matter how bad it is, in perspective to their days, is very good, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go close the door because I can hear my son. Speaking of kids, I've got 7, but
yeah,
I was doing the work, my friend, and I always am. Let's see.
Yeah, but, definitely not a family-friendly conversation we're about to have here. That's for
sure.
Sure.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit. You just got back from Guatemala. Now I've got, and we've got a video here. We've also got a couple letters, I guess, or a letter, and this involves a lot of people, folks. I mean, whether it's Blinken, it's people in Guatemala, it's Ken Paxton. There's just a whole web we're going to weave here. So, I guess, where do you want to start?
Let's start with my documentary, and we'll kind of weave on how I ended up getting invited to Guatemala by their attorney general. So I released my first documentary, which is called "What is Treason?" #Trafficked. And we followed that up with What is Treason? #invaded. I filmed those two with a partner. His name is JJ Carroll. He's a retired Border Patrol agent. Once those films released, I've been working on this story on child trafficking for about 2 years now, specifically the government sponsored child trafficking that's taken place in America and has led to the 400,000 something missing children.
Yes.
When we released those documentaries, I thought, I've been working on this story for 2 years. Me and JJ didn't plan to make the documentary on child trafficking. We were just going to film a documentary on the invasion. And in the process, we came back with so much evidence about child trafficking that we couldn't even fit it into the invasion documentary, that it had to be a standalone documentary. And I knew that I've been telling people this story for 2 years. And even when I met JJ, my partner, and I told him about the child trafficking stuff, he believed me, but it was still sounds so crazy when somebody tells you that the United States government is trafficking children.
Yeah.
That you can't even, it just sounds like a conspiracy theory. So I've been yelling at the walls for 2 years before I met JJ about this major child trafficking network. And when me and JJ went to film our documentary on the border, there was just so many people that were telling us information about child trafficking that when we came back, I had enough to actually make an entire documentary on child trafficking. So I wanted to rush that one out. We made that one in 25 days and I got that out, but it was behind a paywall. So for the price for $9.99, you can buy both of those documentaries. They're on our website, thististreason.com, but they're behind that paywall. And that's where kind of like I really realized, like, people, no matter how great the film is, if people have an excuse to just bury their head in the sand and not pay attention to the child trafficking, they're going to take it. So the paywall, in my opinion, was what really prevented the masses from understanding the scale of this operation. So then I went out without a partner and went by myself. And I spent $25,000 to fund this documentary out of my own pocket so that way I could give it away for free. So on November 25th of 2024, I released Operation Amber Alert, Operation Amber Alert. This documentary in the first 24 hours got over 1 million views. I think it's almost up to 2 million now. And then I had a massive request for people asking if I could get it transcribed into Spanish. So I got to cough real quick.
That's good.
So what I did is I went and got it transcribed into Spanish, and within 24 hours, I was contacted by the Attorney General's office of Guatemala, and they asked if would I be able to come to Guatemala. And after talking to them, I had already had a trip planned to El Salvador in January, and El Salvador is like a 3-hour drive to Guatemala. So I said, hey, I can come over, but I can't make it down until January. They were kind of bummed out and disappointed, but they understood. And then I ended up getting in a Twitter space that night, and just a wave of Guatemalan citizens came in begging me to come to Guatemala, telling me that in the last 24 hours, over 20 Amber Alerts had went out in the last 24 hours. So that's 20 children that were kidnapped in a 24-hour period. And that's just what got reported in Guatemala. And I know that in these third world countries, if 20 are getting reported, we're probably talking about 60 or so a day that are getting kidnapped, because there's probably 20 to 40 that are not getting reported. So that sparked my interest enough for me to go, okay, I gotta just figure this out, and I'm gonna get to Guatemala. So I was already planning to go to Texas from Friday to Sunday, and then I ended up getting invited on to InfoWars on Monday. So I ended up extending my stay in Texas until Monday. So this was on basically on a Tuesday, and on the next Tuesday I was already in Guatemala. So I got a one-way from Texas into Guatemala. And then I was afraid that when I came back that I was going to either get arrested at the gates or something was going to happen to me. So I didn't feel safe coming back to America. So then I caught another one-way into El Salvador, where what Bukele's done in that country is it's a miracle. So I felt extremely safe. I went into El Salvador. I broke the story in El Salvador. I distributed all the evidence to enough people to where no matter what, if they killed me, the story was still going to come out. And then now I just flew back in. And I got in on Monday night. So I got in 2 days ago.
You brought up El Salvador. I think, something really fascinating there, because, and I think at this point, you have to question everything, right? I mean, in terms of the fact, you can look at the fact that El Salvador, the crimes disappeared. And yet this guy is viewed by all of Europe and Western world as some sort of antichrist figure in there. That's what they try to promote him as. And in reality, you have to wonder, well, if they're doing that to a guy who's reducing crime by this amount, who are the real criminals?
Bukele has turned El Salvador in 5 years from the deadliest country in the world to the safest country in South America. I was watching 12, 13, 14-year-old girls walking down dark alleys in shanty towns in the middle of the night with smiles on their face, like skipping around like it's Christmas Day. They feel so safe there. And you know what he did? You want to know the first thing that Bukele did? Is he kicked out US aid. So that's where this whole thing comes back around to. For 20 years, our government had funneled $8 billion into El Salvador over like a 20-year period. And it turned El Salvador into the deadliest country in the world.
Wow.
When US aid goes into these countries, they don't go in there to provide humanitarian aid. They go in as a front organization for the CIA. And that's how the CIA launders money into these third world countries. And then they build out this massive network of NGOs while simultaneously recruiting nationals from that country. And then they use those nationals that they own and control to infiltrate government and infiltrate the media. And then once they've infiltrated the media and they've infiltrated the government enough, they use it as almost like literally it reminds me of like Godfather mafias in these third world countries. And then our ambassadors to these countries become more powerful than the presidents in these third world countries. So if we go back to Guatemala, what has happened in Guatemala is the US aid's been operating in Guatemala for probably, I think, since like the 70s, almost since its creation. And what is Guatemala? What is the status of Guatemala? I mean, their country is on the verge of a civil war. To be honest, if what took place in January of 2020, or sorry, of the summer of 2023, was they had their presidential election. The presidential election took place, and within 24 hours of that election, the Attorney General's office had received over 1,000 complaints of election fraud. And what's really unique and nice about Guatemala is they have same-day paper ballots, in-person voting, voter ID, right? And
wow, what a concept, Ryan.
What a concept, right?
Concept. My whole audience is in on this.
They get the election results the same night, and it makes fraud. Oh,
you can do that?
I supposedly, I guess. So here's where it gets interesting, right? So I think it was last year or a couple of years ago, because pressure from the State Department, right? Guatemala needs to now upgrade their voting process, and they need to use this new software that's recommended by the State Department called TREP, T-R-E-P. So this is the first election that they've used this new software, TREP.
Oh my.
And how their elections work, right, is so they have 22,000 or maybe 24,000, and I'm not dead on these numbers, but just ballpark with me. So they have roughly 22,000 polling locations all throughout Guatemala. And in these polling locations, they have wood tables, right? So just think of a big oak piece of wood, and then it has 3 slits on it. And and in front of one of those slits, it'd be like you walk up and there's a slit where you could slide a piece of paper through the wood top of the table, right? And it goes through the wood table into basically a bag or a container that catches them, right? And in front of that is the polling person, right? Like the person that's running that location. So they have 3 people at the table, and you have to come and turn your ballot, and you drop it into the table, and it kind of just slides through the slip in the table. It goes into a bag, and those bags are transparent, and it's all transparently kept, and it's all out in the open for everybody to see and monitor. So it'd be very hard for somebody to basically lift up this table, because they have to lift up the whole table, get into the bag, and change votes. So it's pretty hard to basically cheat in that environment, right? And then at 6 o'clock, the polls close. So those 3 people that are at the table, plus the poll watchers and the people working at the facility, they open that table in front of everybody, and they have this document. I believe it's called like a document 4, but think about like a tabulator where they're going to tally up and add up all these votes that came out of that little basic bag. And then this tabulator or document 4 is the final document that gets signed off and sent into their electoral college to verify, right? So they're uploading this data. And at 6 o'clock, when the polls close, they start tabulating all the votes, and every precinct is basically uploading all their data to this cloud. All of a sudden, I think, don't quote me on the times on this, I think it's like 8 p.m. Everything goes dark. Their entire system goes off the grid, and it's all a cloud-based system with this TREP, and the system basically crashes. So the citizens of Guatemala are expecting some person to win this election, and they kind of have an idea because of the results that they've seen come in, but then all of a sudden everything goes black. Things come on roughly at about 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. the next morning, and from like 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., like 80 or 90% of the election results are uploaded magically to this cloud. They don't match up. Things don't match what they were seeing coming in the beginning. And, when the polls were closing at 6 o'clock, and then all of a sudden, magically, this dude that nobody's ever heard of and was in 8th place in the polls, and he's now their president. So
Oh my gosh, this sounds like freaking Fulton County, Georgia or something. This is
it's it's to the
Detroit, Michigan,
T.
Philadelphia. I mean, so Ryan, we just met. We met through Heather. You guys all know Heather has been on the show multiple times. But when I started my journey into this in November of 2020. This is what got me into this whole thing. I just couldn't keep my mouth shut, and then we were featured in a Media Matters piece, and I was one of the only channels who survived, and I did that by simply realizing what was going on and just not producing any more content till strikes disappeared, and because I just knew I wanted to save the channel because that was my voice, and then I just produced on Rumble. And but you just don't have the same reach, and you don't get to the people who really need to hear this, which are the ones who don't know anything about it. But you're talking about something here with it's so similar to the playbook, and really propagated by Blinken and our State Department. And I don't know if we can get into that aspect of it now.
Yeah. So
You want to?
let me keep going on this. So the all this is the election fraud is overwhelming, and I can actually get you a gentleman. His name is Diego. He's an attorney, top level attorney in Guatemala, and he knows this election fraud, all the details, everything that I said wrong in here, the dates I messed up. I'll connect you with him and let you interview Diego, and he'll send all the documents and show you all the evidence. I looked at it for basically like a half hour, and I was just like, and like a child could look at this and go, yeah, we're going to investigate this. So how Guatemala works is their government's structured. They have the executive, they have the legislative, and they have the judicial, right? Those
Okay.
are their three branches of government. Now, the attorney general's office is kind of like our attorney general's office. It's not really, I guess it's under the judicial, but it's kind of like an aid to the judicial, but it's completely separate from control of any three of those
Okay.
axes of power. The 8 years ago, our government has never been able to rig all three bodies of government. They've been able to take the presidency, or they've been able to take the attorney general and not the presidency. So, but roughly about 8 years ago, our State Department put pressure on their legislative branch to change their law to make it illegal so that their politicians, their president, cannot fire their attorney general. So our government installs basically this woke attorney general about 8 years ago, and forces their government to change a law that says the president, who was very conservative at the time, doesn't have the authority to fire the attorney general. Now, fast forward to today, right?
Yeah.
They rig the presidency, but we have a good attorney general, right? We have an attorney general that's very conservative, God-fearing, Guatemalan patriot who loves her country and loves her citizens and wants to get to the bottom of these investigations. Now, in order for her to open an investigation into election fraud, she has to be presented with evidence. And then she has to take that evidence, because it has to do with elections and their electoral college, which is a different body. She has to present this evidence to Congress and say, hey, here's what we found. Do you feel like there's enough to investigate? And they have to take a vote. So out of their 160 members of their Congress, and they don't have a Senate, so it's just their Congress,
Okay.
168 members, 108 of them review this evidence and go, wow, yeah, there's enough evidence here. We should investigate. And they voted to give the attorney general the authority to investigate this, right?
Okay.
After that happens, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken suspends the visas and freezes the assets of all 108 congressmen in Guatemala.
My freaking gosh. Are you kidding me?
Swear to God.
I mean,
swear to God. It gets worse, though. It gets worse. Then he goes and he suspends 400 visas to their family, friends, and relatives, and freezes all their assets. So these can be Guatemalan patriots who have been an ally to the United States for 20 gosh damn years and supported everything that we wanted to do here in America. And they maybe, came over here and have a house, or their kids are going to college here. And this little smug little punk strips away their visas and freezes all of their gosh damn assets here in America.
I don't know that we can have enough disdain for these people.
Makes your blood boil, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we're sitting here. You're going to go. This is like it's like Justin Trudeau up in Canada freezing all the truckers' assets. These are all part of the same frickin' club.
All of them, and it's all tied together with pedophilia. And we're gonna unpack this, because you think it can't get worse than this, right? So
Folks,
this,
do me a favor real quick. Just smash that like button, share this thing out. I mean, come on, get this out. And you got to follow Ryan on X as well. If you're on X, it's at Ryan Matta Media, right? Is I think
yes,
your
sir.
handle?
Thanks,
Okay.
Neil.
All right, go on. I just needed to get that out.
And I'll give your audience a little teaser, right? I got internal documents from the Guatemala's Attorney General's office of her attempting to contact our government and get answers for this, right? So that took place. Their elections were the summer of 2023. The suspending of visas was probably shortly thereafter. So let's just say September 2023. We go into 2024. Oh, so at that time too, our CIA, or I would say our CIA, the State Department, USAID, right? Before I went to Guatemala, I hired a private investigator firm, and this gentleman had built himself a tool with JavaScript that can go through our government databases. And there's like 3 different government databases that track USA spending. So it's like official. If they spend money, they have to report it and it has to go into this database, basically. He built this tool that can pull and like massively extract data, organize it all into a simple format, and then he can actually build out graphs and pie charts and everything like that. So I hired this private investigator firm to track every penny that our government has spent or sent to Guatemala over the last 4 years. And it's $797 or $796 million. So that money goes from our tax dollars, go into these NGOs. Like USAID is part of the State Department now, or they're part of our government. So I don't know if they're called an NGO anymore, but consider they're basically the money laundering arm of the CIA. They're the entity that connects our CIA, our State Department, and our Department of Defense. And USAID right now, I believe, according to Mike Benz, has a budget of $50 billion a year. To put that into context, like the CIA has a $15 billion a year budget. The State Department has a $15 or $20 million a year budget. USAID now has a budget that is more than the CIA and the State Department combined. So through these NGOs and organizations, they stage these rent-a riots, these massive protests that aren't real, that are just a bunch of paid hired actors.
Okay.
So they went.
I just talked to somebody the other day, and we had this whole thing with Line 3 up here in Minnesota, and people, this whole rent-a-riot, people say, oh, that's not true, it's not real. It's completely real. In fact, it's not only real, but the rioter, the protester, not only gets paid his weekly allowance, but if he gets sent to jail, he gets an extra $2,500 bonus. Yeah. So he's like, I've been sent to jail 6 times. There's an extra 15 grand, and everything will be expunged from his record. He said, you can go look me up. I don't have a record at all.
Neil, you are spot on, because so these protests, they staged these protests outside of the Attorney General's office for 180 days, demanding that she drop the investigation into the election fraud that had taken place. So for 180 days, and these weren't just small protests, and they weren't just peaceful protests. They were outside of the Attorney General's office, and there was such a mob of people that they actually blocked the entire street, and an ambulance was trying to go down this one-way street and get blocked in with 2 kids in the back of these ambulances, 2 separate ambulances. Both kids died because they were trapped and the ambulance couldn't get these children to the hospital. And then they take these mobs and they go to the Attorney General's house, where they storm and break into her house. And then they went to the Secretary General's home and went into his home as well. And the authorities in Guatemala told me very specifically, we honestly believe that if the Attorney General was at her home, or the Secretary General was there when these rent-a riots raided their homes, that they would have killed the Attorney General. So basically, our State Department is sending literally mercenary hit squads to, I don't know, execute politicians in Guatemala. I don't know how else you could how you could look at it any other way, because they're funded with our tax dollars. They're so violent that they're breaking into the homes of attorney generals and secretary generals in these third world countries. And this is all to show a force and a threat on top of suspending the visas. But the attorney general has stayed steadfast. I mean, when I say she's a God-fearing Guatemalan patriot, I mean, this lady is literally a hero. She is the only thing that's standing between our government completing this coup in Guatemala and their country turning into Venezuela. So from there, right?
Why is it always the ladies?
It's so crazy.
Why aren't the men standing strong?
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is.
It's hard to wrap your head around. So then
you'll get Daniel pennied.
You will. Exactly.
I just throw that out there. I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
So from here, it gets interesting, right? So we know that we have this massive amount of child trafficking that's taking place in America, right? We've had 438,000, and this number as of July. So it's obviously much higher by now. But as of July 1st, there was 438,573 unaccompanied alien children that have been trafficked into America and have arrived at our border without a parent. Now, as these children are arriving at the border, our government has created this public-private partnership with DHS and the Mexican cartels and HHS and these NGOs. And what I mean by public-private partnership is if I asked you, have you ever seen a Mexican cartels delivering kilos of fentanyl or heroin or cocaine or any drug to Border Patrol agents? I'm talking about these cartels. Have you ever seen them bringing their packages over and literally dropping them over a border wall and then just leaving the package there for Border Patrol to find? You never would, right? Because cartels are never going to bring their merchandise and give it and just hand it over to Border Patrol, because Border Patrol is not going to deliver that merchandise to a buyer in America. Yeah. Right now, if your audience just goes on YouTube and they search cartel drops child over border wall, you will see at least 50 different videos of cartels literally bringing children over to a border wall. Yes. And they lean over, like at a frat party. If you wanted to drop your beer down to the next level, you lower your arms over the balcony and get your arm as low as you could and just open your hand and just let the beer fall down, right? That's what you're seeing these cartels doing with these children. And what that means is that these children are arriving at the Mexican border and they'll have a piece of paper with a name, an address, and a phone number safety pinned to their shirt, right? So what happens now is cartels have figured out, when it talks about human and child trafficking, there are two very dangerous parts of the journey for the child trafficker, right? The second most dangerous is bringing the merchandise across the border. The first most dangerous is delivering the merchandise to a buyer in America. So the cartels have figured out that our government has literally taken over the most two dangerous legs of the child trafficking journey. And now all a cartel member has to do is bring a child to the border wall, write the buyer's name, address, and phone number on that piece of paper, staple it to the kid's shirt, and then tell the kid who's just been raped, 80% of them have been raped and assaulted while they've been brought to America, tells that child that's been brutally, savagely raped that, hey, this number belongs to your father or your uncle or your brother. So that way, when a child is picked up by Border Patrol goes, hey, they give him basic, do you need medical attention, food, water, clothing, right? Yeah. And then what's your name? Put your name, where you're from Guatemala. Okay, cool. Who is this? Oh, that's my uncle. That's my brother. Okay, they take this information, they put it into the child's system. From there,
you see on the news, they talk about, oh yeah, they're just getting to their family members.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody get this?
Mm-hmm. So then HHS is then contacted and they say, hey, we got a child ready for pickup. HHS sends an NGO. The NGO takes the child to an HHS intake facility. This is where a child stays for 2 to 14 days. And HHS does the initial screening. And they ask the kid digging deeper questions, like where are you from? Who's your relatives? Do you owe anybody money? And the idea is that they're trying to figure out if this child is indebted to the cartels. That's what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're also supposed to be verifying who this person is. So they call this number and they say, hey, Neil, are you expecting a kid? And you go, yeah. And they go, okay, what's his name and birthday? So all you have to know is the kid's name and his birthday. So you go, yeah, Johnny, he's 7. They go, oh, yeah, perfect. Okay, Neil, we're going to send you this FRA application, and then you're going to fill it out, and then you're going to text me back at this number when you've completed it, and then I'm going to need you to send me a copy of your ID. So any ID will work, right? So you take an ID that you have just bought in New York City, like this one that I bought off a Venezuelan in 15 minutes, brand new New York ID. So I send this ID to them, and this has my name, my address, and they do a background check. They send it out to some third-party company that we've never heard of, and that nobody at that that's working on that case actually gets to verify that this background check came back. It goes to the highest up supervisor at one of these HHS facilities, and then in the process, the caseworker at Health and Human Services is getting a copy of the gentleman's ID that's going to get this child via WhatsApp. They are not using any FBI databases, any internal software. And the background checks that are being done on these illegal immigrants are only being done in America. So this person could be a pedophile, rapist, murderer, or drug dealer in Mexico. But as long as he's never committed a crime in America, the only place they are running this background check is here in America. And these are most of these people that are getting these children are undocumented illegal immigrants that have just invaded America. So at that point, HHS is then supposed to use Google Earth to vet this person's address. That's how they are verifying the address of where these children are going and determining if it's a safe location for a child to go to. So from there, they authorize the delivery of this child to this grown man. And then, so when you hear people like me say our government's lost 323,000 children, what that means is that HHS has vetted the sponsor of a child and they've authorized the delivery of that child to a grown man or woman in America. And they've tried to make contact and locate that child, and the child cannot be found. Nobody answers the phone, or the person that does answer, and they say, "Hey, Neil, we're just calling to check on Johnny. How's Johnny doing?" You go, "Oh, Johnny, I answered a Facebook ad, and a gentleman told me he'd pay me $500 to pick his son up from the airport. I picked this kid up at the airport, and I haven't seen him since." And you go, "Well, they're not checking the IDs when they pick up the person at the airport." "Oh yeah, they're checking the IDs, but the person that shows up at the airport to deliver the child has a manila envelope. Inside that manila envelope is the photo that the HHS agent received via WhatsApp." So the chaperone, or the escort, if you will, the escort is the person that delivers the child to the buyer for our government. The chaperone has the manila folder, and in that manila folder is this ID. Now, when he goes to deliver the child, it's not his job to verify that the ID matches the person giving him the ID. It just they're supposed to match that the ID matches the ID that he has in the folder, which means your wife, your sister, your aunt, or just some random stranger can go to the airport and meet this person in baggage claim and receive this child.
Wow.
We have people at HHS, whistleblowers in my documentary that you'll see, that have came forward and said, "Hey, I was working at HHS, and the person that submitted their ID, I could tell it was fake because looked like they took their cell phone and they were looking down at their cell phone and they took a selfie, and I could see curtains in the background. It was like they were there at a house or a party, and they took this photo. It didn't have like a plain wall. It was obviously fake." So then she goes to her higher ups, and her higher ups go, "Well, like, how do you?" Oh, they tell her that it's not. How does she know that it's a fake ID? She's not a private investigator. She's never had any training. Her job isn't to investigate the legitimacy of the ID. Her job is to make sure that this sponsor has an ID. So she went and she goes, "I'm going to contact the embassy of the country to verify if this ID is real." She contacts the embassy. They confirm that the ID is fraudulent. She goes back to her bosses and tells them. She then gets reprimanded by Adriana Lynch at Health and Human Services, and she's told that if she ever goes above her head ever again and tries to verify an ID, it'll be the last time she works there, and that's her job. That's Adriana Lynch's job, and she needs to understand what her position and what her role here is at HHS. So then she's told, "Well, ask the person for a second form of ID." She goes, "Okay." She contacts the sponsor and she goes, "Hey, we're looking for a second form of ID. Do you have another driver's license or any other documents on you that you can provide for us?" And the gentleman's response was, "I just paid $200 for that ID. What's wrong with the one I just sent you?" So these people, like, think about that, right? This is somebody from a government, and you think that this system is designed for you to get this child, to where you're like, what do you mean a second form of ID? I just paid $200 for this fake ID and I just gave it to you. Now give me my child. So then she was pulled off this case because he didn't have a second one. 2 days later, she found out that they authorized the delivery of that child to that man.
This is so wild. I mean, their attitude is actually, I mean, it's this is a vastly more serious issue, but I watched this testimony in Congress, or it was in the Senate in front of Dick Durbin, and it was a guy who was a prosecuting attorney, and he was an illegal alien. And I'm thinking, wait, I'm scratching my head here. How can you be a prosecuting attorney to prosecute people on crimes when the very act of you being here is illegal? But yet they just have this attitude. Well, no, this is just the way it's supposed to be. And what you're saying is basically wait, I just bought this fake ID. Why are you giving me grief? Well, because, it might be a fake ID, I mean, and then you want me to give you a kid.
Yes.
It
blows all logical, like every logical construct that you have or perception that you had of our government. I'm pushing that out the window because you need to get it out of your mind. Our government is not the good guy. Our government, and think about this, we're talking about 438,573 children arriving at our border. And to put that into context, U of M Stadium, right, the largest football stadium in America, holds 100,000 people. So 4 times over that has came across our border, and then 323,000 of them have been lost. That is not feasibly possible unless this was being ran like a full-scale military operation. The processes have to be so streamlined, and the operation has to be at such a massive scale to move that many bodies, specifically children, and then disappear them. Because we're not seeing children eating out of garbage cans. You don't go to Walmart and see like 10 children in the back behind Walmart picking out of the garbages or begging for money, because these children have been delivered to a buyer. They're not out there roaming the streets, right? These children are being sex trafficked or labor trafficked or worse. And you hear President Trump say this, right? Yeah. A majority of them are most likely dead.
Yeah, because they've outlived their usefulness. And you need to really like remove, I'm just going to speak directly to my audience. You need to remove how you think. So I remember when I went to watch Sound of Freedom. And I again, like you, Ryan, I thought, oh, this is kind of like conspiratorial. I mean, this just can't be. I mean, nobody, like, who's all that interested in kids anyways? None of it made sense to me. Okay. It doesn't make sense. Okay. But you need to just start by removing all of that. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. I remember when I used to do sidewalk counseling at abortion clinics. One of the gals who talked to us, who trained us in sidewalk counseling, she told her story. She used to work in the abortion wing of a hospital. Okay, so you got one wing of the hospital saving babies prematurely. You got the other one killing them. And here's what they had. And this is where it gets so wild, people. They had sales goals. Now, I worked in sales at the time. That was my whole shtick, was sales. And I'm going, it's like reset the mechanism. Sales goals. We're talking about like taking babies here. It doesn't make sense. But it's real. And when they view the child as simply chattel or property, which is what you're hearing Ryan describe here very clearly, that's where you just have to kind of get to that level. And I know it's hard, but you just got to kind of reset the mechanism to think how these people think. But again, please smash that like, do share the stream out. Ryan, I want to get back to you here, but I just had to throw that out there because I think abortion and this, and Tim Ballard said that to me too, are so intrinsically tied together because you're taking the worth of those children and negating them. And then that's what allows all this to then happen.
Let me grab a drink of water while you're talking to your audience. I'll be right back in 1 second.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll have Ryan right back. But when I interviewed Tim Ballard at the RNC, he said that was the beginning of all of this. When we can devalue a human child to that point, that then now they don't exist, and so these children basically don't exist, and they are just viewed as property. So if it's just the loss of property, it's not like you're thinking the loss of a human life. To them, it's just the loss of property. It's basically slavery. It's modern day slavery, obviously, but just amp that up. And that's what we're experiencing here. Now, folks, I want you to comment here in the chat. How many of you actually believe that this is taking place and you find this story to even be believable to you? And because I saw somebody in the chat here already asked the question, is this true? So, you have to start with, is this true, and whether or not you can get there. So I'm curious to see in the chat. Ryan, continue on here.
So,
by the way, you can see Ryan's documentary on his X page, folks.
Yes. So right at the top of my profile.
Yes, it's right at the top of his profile. So if you want to watch his documentary, I want to promote that here really quickly, Ryan. So there it is. There's his handle. It's at Ryan Matta Media. Mine is at Neil E. Johnson. Okay. But go check his documentary out. All right.
So now that your audience has an understanding of this scale of this operation, the craziest part that really blew my mind. So I'm in this Twitter space and I get contacted by the Attorney General's office, and I go, okay, I'm going to go to Guatemala. I need to look into the exact numbers of children that have came because HHS has all this data on their website. Now I knew that 60 to 70% of these children were coming from 3 countries: Guatemala, Ecuador, and El Salvador. Okay. So I wanted specifically to dig into Guatemala. And when I started to add up the numbers, I was shocked. 42 to 48% of all of these children have came from Guatemala. That means out of that 438,573, 212,942 have came from Guatemala.
Wow.
Their country size is 18 million. Yeah, that's roughly 1 to 2% of their entire population. Now, if you talk about just their child population, You're talking about probably 2 to 4% of all children. To put that into context, we have 300 and let's just say 60 million citizens in America. That would be roughly about 6 to 7 million American children just vanishing over a 4-year period. So their government has this major issue with child trafficking. Now, on April 12th, they write this letter to Ken Paxton. And I'm going to read that letter here in a second so your audience can understand the scale of this operation. So this is before they raid the foundation, Save the Children. And on April 25th, they raided the NGO from Guatemala called Save the Children for trafficking children into America. Now, prior to that, they're contacting the Attorney General of Texas, which is pretty mind-blowing. The fact that they've had no response. When we're talking about an operation in a scale this large and this monumental, to get no response is unacceptable. Now, unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, but their government was actually spoke very highly of Ken Paxton, and they felt like that he was under attack here in America, so that maybe there was maybe this slipped through the radar. But I want to make sure that I'm not letting it slip through the radar, and hopefully that this gets back to Ken Paxton's office, because in my opinion, it's unacceptable. Now, the other dozen or so. You can pull up the Ken Paxton one right now. Yeah, go ahead. I'll read this off here for you guys. So this is the letter from the Guatemalan Attorney General's office to Ken Paxton. Let me read this for your audience so that they can understand the scale. It is a pleasure to greet you and wish you success in your daily activities. By higher instructions, I am writing you to request, if you consider it appropriate, your immediate attention to a serious situation affecting the Republic of Guatemala. As the public minister, we have received complaints as a criminal report about a very important and sensitive issue, our beloved children. As you know, deficiencies in security and diplomacy related to the border between the United States and Mexico have resulted in a significant increase in drug trafficking, but also a devastating emergence of human trafficking. In relation to the new complaint that has been filed with the institution, and a horrifying pattern of disappearance of children from Guatemala has been brought to our attention, and it has been reported to the public ministry that a complex network involving NGOs, non-governmental organizations operating within Guatemala, who have collaborated with specific entities in the state of Texas, are implicated in the abuse of Guatemalan children when they are away from their parents and do not have someone to protect them. These Guatemalan children have reportedly been placed in shelters and organizations throughout Texas under the guise of providing them with a family environment. Disturbingly, there have been reports and documented situations of sexual abuse in these shelters, which is a huge violation and rights and dignity of these children. So let me pretext that there for your audience. What this Attorney General is saying, they're saying that we have evidence, and we know, because we know here in America, because our DOJ has an open investigation and a lawsuit into one of these NGOs called Southwest Q Programs, and we know that children have been raped, molested, and assaulted inside these facilities here in America. So we know it, and their government knows it as well. And it was so bad in the very beginning, in the early stages of 2021, that Greg Abbott had to show up with the Texas sheriffs and hold a press conference in front of one of these facilities, saying that if DHS doesn't shut it down, the Texas government is going to go into this facility and they are going to arrest every employee inside this facility and any federal agent that tries to stop or interfere with it happening. Wow. So we've known this from the very beginning. We knew that these were breeding grounds for pedophilia and criminals and child molesters. And we've allowed them to open, and not just allowed them to open, but continue to fund them. So their government is very well aware of this. And they're trying to say, hey, Ken, we're about to raid one of these facilities. Let's do a joint operation, because if we have the intel here and we know that they're getting trafficked into Texas, this is a great opportunity for you to raid them at the same time. And let's save these Guatemalan children. But it fell on deaf ears, and now it gets worse.
So I wanted to be clear. So again, just so my audience understands, this is a letter from the Attorney General of Guatemala to Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Correct. Okay, so this goes on, and it says, the state of Texas bears much of the responsibility for these lost children who have been transferred to the border and processed migratorily in Texas. And Texas is apparently fully aware of this situation. Among these non-governmental organizations operating in Guatemala and the state of Texas that may be involved in child trafficking operations, the involvement of Save the Children, the involvement of Changing the Way We Care. Another one is the World Childhood Foundation, Arise, and La Unión del Pueblo
Pueblo
Entero.
Entero.
Yes, yeah, that's it. You got it. There you go. How do I say that?
Pueblo.
Pue-
Isn't that
Pueblo
like house,
Entero.
I think? Pueblo Entero.
Pueblo Entero is concerning. What could be particularly alarming about these organizations is that some of them receive federal funds from the American taxpayer. I have been informed that other non-governmental organizations operating in Guatemala and Texas could be accomplices to child trafficking, possibly supporting this trafficking and other issues. Oops, I grabbed the wrong document. Here it is. And other issues with unaccompanied children and adolescents traveling, but they have proven unsuccessful in protecting children in Guatemala. The public ministry, obligated to protect the rights and interests of the inhabitants of the Republic of Guatemala, will spare no effort and exhaust all necessary efforts to locate and criminally prosecute those responsible for this enormous tragedy. Be assured that the Attorney General and Chief of the Public Ministry of the Republic of Guatemala will zealously execute her legal mandate to eradicate this epidemic of child trafficking and hold those who commit these crimes against humanity accountable. I respectfully request that you contact us as soon as possible to agree on a joint effort at resolving this humanitarian crisis for which your country is directly responsible in part. Without further ado, I subscribe with the highest expression of my consideration and esteem.
Here it is. Huh.
That is just one of many. Talking about Janet Yellen. And let your audience think about this, right? I'm Ryan Matta. I'm a guy that wasn't even an investigative journalist 4 years ago, right? But I've built a reputation that I can be trusted, and then I'm going to speak the truth, and I'll do whatever is necessary to help save children. So they had to go as far as contacting me, some independent journalist, because they've exhausted every single option and they've had no help from the United States government trying to stop this operation, trying to stem the flow of it, trying to do anything but almost accelerate it. So then here's the kicker, right? So after this raid, about 12 days after, so the raid was on the 25th. It was either May 6th or to May 6th, 7th, or 8th. Anthony Blinken gets on a flight, flies to Guatemala, holds a press conference saying that this attorney general is corrupt and she needs to be investigated.
Of course he does.
Of course, right? Just like, and it gets, I'm holding the best for last, Neil. So think about that. Joe Biden flies to Ukraine, threatens to withhold funds if the prosecutor isn't fired. Anthony Blinken flies to Guatemala and then starts suspending, but he already did, but previously suspended the visas and basically punished anybody that even looked into the investigation. And it's almost like Blinken flies down, holds this press conference to showcase, hey, anybody that wants to join the attorney general in investigating this, well, guess what? You're going to be going up against the United States government. And you've seen what happened to the other people that have already tried. So why don't you guys just sit there and not do anything and know your role? Because we're gonna do everything possible from the United States side of the United States government, the State Department, Anthony Blinken, the CIA, USAID, to crush this attorney general. So now they're putting pressure on the president to change the law that they had changed originally back in 8 years ago, that now would give the president the ability to remove this attorney general from office. And if that happens, the coup will be complete. Our CIA and State Department will have basically dictatorship control over Guatemala. They will have subverted the will of the people. And come to find out, guess who sits on the board of directors, or guess who was the chair of the board of directors for Save the Children?
Board of directors, Save the Children. Blinken?
Nope. Jill Biden. So I didn't send this one to you. I should have sent that already.
Oh, God.
But I just sent you a photo. I don't know if you have time, if you're able to pull it up here and throw it here on your screen.
I can do it.
Okay, so what I just sent you, that is Jill Biden being elected chair of Save the Children. So we have the president's wife sitting as the chair of an organization that has been raided for trafficking children. And then on top of that, I can send you several more, but I can just talk about them. Here's 2 more photos of Save the Children. The first one is Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's wife, in 1985. And this is Ghislaine Maxwell. Mirror organized a Disney Day out of the kids at Lord and Lady Bass Longlet House in Worcestershire. A great day of fun in which Ghislaine Maxwell presented a check for $2,000 to Save the Children Fund, September 13th, 1985. So Jeffrey Epstein's wife is involved with Save the Children since 1985. We have Oprah Winfrey in 2019, and this title of this one is Save the Children Honored by Bob Iger Amid Oprah Winfrey's Presidential Pondering. Oprah Winfrey, and now we have Jill Biden sitting on the board of directors. When I tell people that this operation is so much bigger than we could ever imagine, and God can only imagine what an organization like this has been doing to children since 1985. And if we talk about this elite pedophile ring and network, that we always hear these stories about the CIA's trafficking children in Puerto Rico and in there's another one that starts with a P, Puerto Rico and Costa Rica, and all these places that the CIA is involved in. Well, how many of those locations is there a Save the Children? Because this is an international business, and it would be the perfect front organization because they have access to the most vulnerable children.
Doesn't it? I mean, save the children. Who wouldn't want to save the children? I mean, this is just like marketing, like Obamacare. I mean, to me, it's like, they called it the Affordable Care Act, and then my insurance went up sixfold as soon as that was passed. So Bob Iger, is it Iger or Iger?
Might be Iger.
I think it's Iger. Bob Iger. Okay, is there a kid that Disney has not wrecked? Name a kid that's gone through Disney that they haven't wrecked. I'm serious. I mean, what? Katy Perry was a Disney kid. I mean, I could go on. Miley Cyrus was a Disney kid.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I do have to hard stop at 11:30 though. I just want to kind of give you a little heads up on that.
Yeah, sounds good. We got 2 minutes left, folks. Ryan, okay, let me just say this. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I want to ask all of my subscribers, go follow Ryan on X. I'm going to put his link up here again. And go watch his documentary. It's right over there. And so if you're not signed up for X, go create an X account. It's not hard. It's not hard, folks. It's the last chance we have on a major platform right now to share stuff without fear of censorship. It really is. I mean, I had a post demoted the other day because I made a joke about tranny fluid and Bud Light and stuff. But whatever. I mean, they still have some holdovers there. So, but I want to encourage you to give Ryan a follow over there. And then Ryan, I guess any parting words you have. I mean, what do you want to tell my audience? I mean, we've uncovered, here on the show, and this, I bring this up, folks. I tell you to share this stuff, clip it. I don't care how you use this. Okay. Just get the story out, please, because I didn't know this until I talked with Ryan. I didn't know who Ryan was until I was on X and then started seeing some of his posts, and then Heather connected me with him. So exposure is the answer to all of this, as more people know. So,
and big shout out to Heather Mullins. She goes by @TalkMullins over on X. Make sure you give her a follow as well. She does some legendary work, and she connected us. So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Heather. So I want to say big thanks to Heather, and thank you for having me, Neil. And I want to connect you with some of these people from Guatemala too. I got to run, but as soon as I get time, I'm going to send you some links to some people. I would love to see you interview them. Don't trust me, guys. Go verify this evidence for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go do your research and let me know what you uncover.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, Ryan. I know you got to get to another show. We'll see you on the next turn. All right. Talk to you later.
God bless.
Bye. Folks, this is a huge, please, for the love of all things holy, this story is so big. These NGOs are so massive. It is how they do things now. It is how they funnel the money. It's how they do all of this. And if we're not exposing it, people just kind of go around in la la land and then they're like, they don't get it. So, and this is real. You got the letter there. You got the stuff. Ryan's been on the ground in Guatemala, meeting with the Attorney General of Guatemala. And then we've got our government, and we were supposed to be the good guys. Anyways, again, please go support my sponsors. That's how we support the show. Okay. MyPillow.com /lumberjack or call the 800 number. The best deal on premium pillows, standard pillows, and mattresses. You will never find those mattresses priced lower. 1-800-568-2865. Again, that's 1-800-568-2865. Folks, thank you so much for joining the show today, and we'll see you on the next episode. All right. Peace out. Hit the wrong button.